Welcome, everybody. Joe Tarnowski with ECRM, and I have with me today Lean Nazuli from NPD, and she's going to talk about what we can expect in the office and school supplies categories during this upcoming back-to-school season. Now, the last time we spoke, we were in a much different situation. We were in the middle of lockdown. No one was going to school. No one was going to their offices. So I'm really curious to hear how everything is changing now that we're opening up. Hopefully, we'll be staying opening up. So, Lean, thank you so much. I'm going to hand it off to you to get things started.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe, for having me. It was about this time last year or close to that we chatted, and the office supplies industry looked completely different than it does now. We were all going through things that were very different, and I think right now we're anticipating a a little bit more of a normal start to how schools will reopen. But there is a lot of uncertainty that we're still all facing, right? And I know everybody's talking about how that may impact consumer mind frame and how parents choose, right, how their kids go back to school. I think schools all plan to be open. Many of them plan to be in person. There's just going to be a lot of mitigation of different policies, and parents, of course, thinking about what's the best way to send their kids to school. So just a quick, this is me. I work on the office supplies team at NPD, and it's my information. Quick kind of recap here about what's happening in office supplies. I'm going to take you through some of the growth drivers. We're going to talk about our channel performance across the office supply space. We're also going to get into school supplies specifically and how they're performing, and then, of course, e-commerce. So office supplies overall are up about 10% versus 2020, and still up 5% versus 2019. So we're actually performing fairly strong versus 2 years ago, which is great news for us. Food is down versus 2020 and 2019. I think some of that has to do with the fact that you had a lot of consumers last year really preferring to go someplace as a one-stop shop, right? So they want to get their groceries and they want to get their supplies at the same time. Drug also offered that feeling of convenience. So if you needed a quick trip in and out, you could also go to your drugstore. You also had major metropolitan areas that people reduced their commuting, right? So if they could go to their neighborhood drugstore and get some of the things that they needed, they did. Store sales are back. We're up 14% over 2020, which is phenomenal. We're flat to 2019. And I'll talk a little bit about what's driving that right now. And then e-commerce, we're up 36% still over 2019, and we're flat to 2020. There's a lot of factors driving that during the back to school season, so we'll go over that as well. One aspect to sort of note around the key drivers is that there's really quite a bit of activity happening around the work from home and hybrid workforce and what these consumers are buying and helping to drive sales within the industry. There's a little also going on around the older student and what they need as they sort of prepare for either heading back to high school or going to college. And then you've got storage and organization still holding strong, creativity, and we have the back to school rebound taking place. So those core school supplies, so we're talking about like your glue sticks and your pencils and these types of really core K through 6 school supplies. These are up 25% over 2020 early season. So we're talking the first 5 weeks. We still have 7 weeks to go in our traditional season. And versus 2019, we're still down about 16% with these school supplies. So I think as you think about like late June and then like early to mid July, a lot of consumers are still enjoying their summer, right? We've been vaccinated, we're coming out of COVID, and the economy is opening back up, experiences are returning. Everybody is just really excited to go out, have some fun, see friends, hang out with friends and family, go back to their, some of their favorite restaurants. So I think you've got a lot of kind of just summer fun activity, and consumers' minds are still preoccupied. And it's still early for a lot of the nation in terms of back to school. The Northeast doesn't even go back until after Labor Day in some cases, or even I think a few schools have pushed out the start date to even mid-September. So it is still really early. So I would consider that 16% more of a factor having to do with people just still preoccupied with enjoying their summer. And we're going to see a lot of kind of rebound and activity happening in the heart of August as people really get back to school shopping. And then, e-commerce, as I said, we're still up, we're flat. And I wanted to dig down a little bit deeper on that. I thought it might be of interest to the audience and listeners today. Is that something that you think we should do? I have a couple slides on it.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's go.
Let's
go. And good point about the summer, because last year, a lot of these people did not even have a summer to enjoy. They were cooped up inside, maybe their backyards or something local. So now that they actually can get out, they are enjoying that time out as much as they can before they go back.
Yes. That's exactly what I'm seeing. And to that note, I think a lot of us are still shopping online. That's a learned behavior that we've kind of become accustomed to during COVID, and we've adapted. In office supplies last year, the volume gains were strong, right, versus 2020. And you can see some of that carrying over into the beginning of 2021. So that dotted line you see on the graph, that's really when the shutdown took place. So as e-commerce sales wrapped around 2020 and into 2021, they really stayed strong and well above our kind of pre-pandemic shutdown 2020 levels. And what's happening is, as the economy opens up, as we get a little bit more comfortable heading back out, seeing people being physically present with everyone else, we're going back to stores, right? And that is impacting our share. So as store sales come back, the share of e-commerce sales within office supplies is seeing an impact. However, our volume is actually holding relatively strong to the pandemic e-commerce volume. So you can see a little bit of a dip there, that 2021 light blue line after, during the spring, you see some volume loss. That was really like right after the shutdown, where a lot of us jumped online and started making a lot of our purchases there. And then as you sort of head into June and the back to school season, that volume is still holding, right? So we're still kind of trending around, negative, anywhere from -3-4% to +1% week to week. What could take place as the season gets closer is that the back to school season is really where that consumer that shops the store is in the market, right? Outside of the back to school season, it's a lot of our home office business customers, small business, medium business customer that's purchasing supplies. During the back to school season is when mom, dad, students come out and they're back in the stores and they're purchasing a lot of these things that they need. So as that takes place, e-commerce is going to have to work really hard for every single volume and share gain that they're going to receive. So I think that that's something we kind of have to monitor. So if we're seeing that 2020 line start to land somewhere between 2019 and 2021, 2020 from last year, that's the trend that I would expect during the back to school season. And that blue line is going to land somewhere volume wise between these two, the green and the blue. So thinking about that and then looking at the share impact. So this is your share. The previous slide was the volume. This is your share. As the store sales began to come back, that 2021 share dipped well below 2020. So we've been losing on average maybe 2 to 4 points depending on the week. And as we're heading into the back to school season and those store sales are coming back and consumers are shopping for their supplies at mass and at, you know, different specialty and craft, that share is dipping. And so I think that we're going to continue to see a little bit of that dip as we get into the heart of the season. And to that point, like as these store-based consumers come back into the market, that's why you see in every year during the back to school season, the share goes down compared to the rest of the year. So with that in mind, I think what we're going to see is that volume may hold relatively strong. It'll definitely be above 2019. It might be slightly below 2020, but our share is going to come back to about a 16-18% share after being at 2020, in 2020 at 2022. What did I just say? I'm sorry. It'll land at 22% in 2020. Man, that was a tongue twister. So
well, I have a quick question for you about that. What about these kind of hybrids, you know, the buy online, pick up in the store? Are you seeing a lot of that? Do you think, you know, that's where a lot of people are going to end up?
Great question. So there is a lot of work being done at retail on convenience, and consumers in many cases, or in some cases, right, it depends on the demographic group, is willing to pay more for that convenience. Buy online, pick up in store is doing very well for office supplies. I also think you have different consumers that, consumer types that might be having the products delivered to them when they purchase them online versus when they buy online, pick up in store. During the back to school season, one of the, I would say like primary conveniences that is provided to the consumer is this option to add all to cart directly from the school list. So there are school lists that connect to your teacher, or local schools. Teachers can upload these lists onto various retailers' platforms. And then from there, the items can be added all to cart and just by one click. And then the consumer has the option to continue shopping or to check out with those items. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of consumers that find value in this, and they're willing to pay, right, the price that comes with that convenience. Then you have a different subset of consumers that really want to item pick, they want to bargain hunt, and they want to make sure that they're able to use all the different savings that they're researching throughout the season, right? So their shopper journey is a little bit different. So I think, yes, that's a growth area, and I think it's a continued growth area for the future. The more seamless, easy that retailers can make that for the shopper. It needs to be, if you're looking for convenience, it needs to be convenient. You don't want to have glitches, you know, or certain things happening in the background that kind of, right, moot point the whole reason that the consumer is trying to shop that way.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out, because you're right, you have those two groups of consumers. You'll have some consumers that didn't make as much money, or, you know, they were a little bit, they lost their job, or they were furloughed or reduced hours, and they're going to be a little more conscious of values when they're shopping. But then you have other people that were working full time, nothing changed, and in fact, because they weren't going out, they weren't using services, they actually were able to save more money during the pandemic, and they may be a little more, you know, up for the convenience, even if it costs more.
Exactly. And I think you're spot on. I do think that's a longer story. We can always talk about it later on, but just the whole concept of the stimulus, right, mm-hmm. and the unemployment benefits, and a lot of these additional income has been helping retail spend, and it's contributed to why in some cases office supply sales are doing so well. I think as we, you know, as people return to work, and as some of that stimulus subsides, we could see an impact on sales down the line. How soon that happens, you know, remains to be seen. We're watching the data very closely, week to week. We're talking about it every single week. internally and with clients. So I think that that's just something that we have to continue to monitor and see when that starts to subside. Some of the hope for back to school is that the child tax credit will provide a boost there and some funds for consumers to be able to purchase supplies. I also know in some cases there was teachers received some sort of stipend and that they were able to use that for supplies. Another area that we just recently surveyed, we have a checkout. It's a receipt harvesting product where we can talk to our consumers. And one of the consumer bases that we, surveyed was teachers. And we asked them, how do you plan to receive some of your supplies? And what we found is about 20 to 30% said that they might actually be able to receive the supplies from their schools. So schools that still have funds that they need to spend, and they might be spending these funds on, cross industry areas from tech to some of the janitorial and sanitation products that they need, PPE, but they're also in some cases purchasing the supplies that they need for the classroom. And in doing that, it might actually even alleviate, what the consumer might have to buy. So when we talk about some of the challenges the industry is going to face during this back to school season, that's one of the factors, right? There are several, but that's one of them. And we'll go through some of the other challenges too, but I thought that might be interesting to know. This is what the season has looked like in the past and what we're seeing so far. And you've got your comps on the bottom there in the grid. So your 2020 versus 2019, that's last year's comps for the season. They were pretty brutal. They really hit our office supplies and school supplies players pretty hard. You can see in that week right before August, we were down about 32%. So it's pretty steep. That's one of our first peak weeks of the season. And then when you're looking at 2021 and 2020, we're rebounding. You're seeing that the growth rates there, up 18 and 20%, the last couple weeks of data that we just received. And then we actually have an early indicator data where we can see our data about 4 days after the close of the week. And I just took a peek at that this morning. And so for that most recent week, week ending July 31st, it's a strong week. So when we have that data and we're going to be releasing it, we expect even better results than we saw last week. But I'll give you an example. Writing instruments is up somewhere around 54%. I mean, it's just tremendous growth that we're seeing in the rebound for some of these categories. And then versus 2019, unfortunately, but that's, the case in office supplies, we are down about 1 to 2% depending on the week versus 2019, but that's to be expected. We saw this huge shift in digital products and transition, both in work and in learn, right? So we had the virtual learning. A lot of students were using Chromebooks and notebooks. A lot of people that were working from home, they've really kind of adjusted to digital document sharing and, the various ways to be able to electronically sign the things that they need to sign. So a lot of that is impacting the sales of our products as well. I do think of it more as a very long-term impact. I don't think it's going to be an immediate one, hence the, softer decline here. But I think it's something that we're always watching.
Yeah, look, we're a good example of that. We, when we went from in-person programs to virtual, think of all of the office supplies that we had at our in-person programs: pens, pads, signage, equipment, all of that. Don't need it anymore. We don't have any of that. It's just, this. So just, as one example, it just completely transformed our need in terms of office supplies.
Agreed. I mean, I have a few friends that are teachers that I speak to, and even the way that their assignments are given out now, some of it's sent through electronically, either through email or through a portal. Teachers can grade the assignments right on their tablet or their notebook in some cases. So it's just changing the entire structure and the dynamic even within the classroom of how interactions are done. And I think that over time, as it gains in adoption, at different schools and school demographics, I think that we could see the impact grow. But it will be within the commercial space, to your point. Definitely. We've seen a huge impact. I mean, last year, commercial sales were down in some cases 30 to 40 to 50%, depending on the month. Wow. So we're rebounding in 2020, but a lot of that rebound is actually school supplies within the commercial space. I think as your larger, right, Class A offices open up, we will start to see more of those like office type products kind of growing, ranking at the top for our commercial service and our B2B sales. Instead, right now, what we're seeing is that in our e-commerce space, a lot of the top growth subcategories have to do with small business, home office worker. So some of what was being bought within the commercial space actually shifted into our e-commerce channel, and that consumer is now there. So to that point, that's actually, so this slide here, I put some of our growth drivers within the industry to call that out. And if you look on the bottom left, that's one of the factors that has contributed a lot and will continue to contribute to retail office supplies in the long term, is that home office, hybrid workforce, collaborative working. So I think even as we return to offices, we will still have a much higher penetration of that home office, hybrid workforce and flexible work environment within the space. So that worker will continue to go to stores, they'll go online to get some of the items that they need. And I always get asked the question, well, what do you think the penetration could be in the long term or in the future? And I say that it's going to vary by vertical. So for example, you have certain verticals that have been very quick. They're the early adopters of flexible work from home environments. So if you look at the tech industry, a lot of these companies have quickly adopted and rolled out these flexible work arrangements. You have other industries where it is just really hard to do that. It's just not easy, right? So if you think about the medical space in some of, in hospitals, in some cases, in many of these cases, hospitals still need to order supplies. They still need to be able to, treat these patients in person. And another area would be banking, for example. There are many areas in banking where, the preference is to be in the office and in person. So I think you will have to think about it vertical to vertical. And then on that note, that is something we're looking at in office supplies, is being able to splice our commercial data through by vertical industry and be able to see what the demand looks like.
What's interesting is that it's shifting where, like, if you're in an office, it's the office that's making the purchases. But when you're in this home office environment, it's the consumer who's making it, even if they're expensing it ultimately. But I think more and more the consumer is, the person who's at home is making those purchases.
Yeah, and it's getting a lot, it's more fragmented that way, right? So I think that provides several opportunities to sell for retailers, for the manufacturers. It is changing the channel dynamics. It's changing a lot of things within the industry, just like a lot of other industries are experiencing as well. So, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I think the big call outs, right, is that a lot of our growth is coming from things like storage and organization. So as consumers set up their home offices, as they spend more time at home, they want to purge all the things in their home, right? They have time to do that now that their commuting time is cut down or non-existent. So they're spending time at home, they're organizing, they're making their spaces the way that they like. And I would also think about these groups in different phases. You have some groups that are still sort of like on the bench waiting to know, when am I going to go back to the office? So they haven't fully invested in a home environment. You have others that were provided direction that they could work from home permanently, or they have a flexible work arrangement even after offices reopen. So these consumers might have said, okay, I can invest in my home office space then, and I will make it what I want it to look like. So that's one area that we've seen growth. Coloring is another growth area. You know, a lot of these sort of mental wellness, you know, so if we look at our books data, a lot of like our journals, self-guided prompt notebooks, the adult coloring and kids coloring, these are all growth areas over the last year. And in office supplies, we're seeing the same thing. It's just, how can I partake in activities that help me either pass time or takes my mind off of a lot of the other stresses that are kind of in the background. So we are seeing that. However, I would caution that I think as consumers return to experiences, we could see a softening there, at least temporarily, you know, while everyone's excited to do these new activities that kind of have not been available to them for the last year.
Yeah.
Writing is one of our strongest areas of growth right now. Pens are killing it. I mean, just they're driving growth in writing and driving growth for the industry for us. I think some of this has to do with the home office worker going back, and then the you know, return to work, small businesses reopening. You have the back to college student and the high school student, you know, purchasing these types of products for what they do. So I think, you know, this has just been a really great area. It's also an area that's had a lot of innovation. So we've seen different kinds of writing instruments come out. It's really cool. And then finally, school supplies, you know, I mentioned that at the beginning, we are down 16%, but up 25% with these types of products as a whole. Another, you know, big call out, I would say, is the passion projects. I think that these are very interesting. We've seen die cutting machines really kind of take off in the last year. I think a lot of people like to be able, you know, to create, right? Personalize, have their self-expression can be through some of the things that they're creating. And it's also allowed them in some cases to kind of create a side hustle, right? And you have consumers opening up, you know, businesses on marketplace platforms. And it's just another way to kind of create a hobby for yourself. I don't think everybody is doing it to make a ton of money. Some consumers, you know, are, but I also think some people just do it as something that makes them feel good. So it's another form of mental wellness.
Yeah, I know somebody in Maine who built a canoe from scratch with his son. Wooden
amazing.
canoe. You don't
Yeah.
track canoes, I don't think, but
I don't. Well,
in part as a craft,
I
maybe.
ask our sports guys. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was interesting because he posted pictures of it, like showing the progress. It took, I think, 60 or 90 days, and it's just,
Wow.
you know, shaping the wood and all that. I mean, and he never did it before. It's just a project he wanted to do with his kid during last summer, and
Did they use it?
I don't know if they used it yet, but because I think they just finished it, and they're like doing some other treatments that they need to do to it in order to use it. But it's pretty cool watching the whole
Very
thing.
cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is happening in a lot of cases. We also have more time, right?
Yeah.
When you're working from home, you have a little bit more time, or if you're not working. I just put up some of the challenges right here on the right side. You know, it's not all right roses and flowers. There are challenges that we're going to face in the coming weeks, the coming year. Some of these, just to quickly touch on them, we have the return to offices impact on demand. So as these larger offices open and as consumers head back to offices, we could see a softening of some of these categories. I don't think they will all like dip below what we were seeing in 2019, because you're still going to have that higher penetration of hybrid, collaborative and home office workers. And to your point, these workers are going to be at a larger, right? There will be more of them than there were pre-pandemic. So I think that will remain at retail, and that buying will stay fragmented for quite a time unless there's a structural change in how corporations handle how someone in a work from home environment purchases their supplies, right? So unless that changes on a mass basis, then you'll continue to see this more fragmented behavior in terms of where people are getting the supplies for their home office. Growing reliance on digitally connected work, I touched on that earlier. Just as we kind of shift to this more digital connected environment, that will have an impact on the amount of supplies we have. Also, when you're sitting at your desk, you're less likely to lose your pen, right? Lose your pencil. If I'm traveling less, there's less of a chance for me to say, oh my gosh, I forgot my pen. I need a pen and I forgot. So I'm going to go, quickly pick one up. So I think just if you're in the same place, you have your items and they last you longer. And then return to experiences, I think, is going to impact our creativity type categories to a certain extent. We talked a little bit about the uncertainty in the fall. So, if people are going to be traveling domestically, but still spending time at home and kind of mitigating some of their risks, we could still see a very strong creative side of the business performance in Q4, just due to the nature that people maybe will still be spending time at home while also mixing it up with some experiences, right? Depending on their comfort levels. And then inventory and out of stocks. There have been some clients that have announced this in their earnings calls, and there are other areas that we've heard that this could be something that we're going to face in the coming season. But our team will be monitoring this as well, and we'll be out at stores looking at what's happening and how does this look. So it's just another area that I think a lot of industries are facing. And it's one that we could potentially face during the back to school season as well. And we're continuing to kind of monitor that as best we can as well. And on that note, I think a lot of times when consumers are faced with a high level of uncertainty, right, and you feel a little bit out of control, you might revert to some of the things that you know very well. In other industries, we saw that, right? Like consumers went back to the brands that they love. And in office supplies, national branded products, right? So the Crayola, 5-Star, 3M, the self-stick notes, like these brands combined have been outperforming private label or store brands throughout the year. Now, what's happening during the back to school season is that when the consumer goes back into the store, right, their shopper journey is a little different, and they might, in some cases, opt for a private label product when they're in the store. So what we've seen is as we kind of head into this back to school season, that the growth rate of national brands and private label brands is starting to get a little bit closer. And I think that's something that's just kind of important to continue to monitor through the season, because there could be a shift in dynamic as these store sales come back and as that back to school consumer comes back as well into the store, and they're looking for certain, they're making these decisions about how to fulfill and execute on their school lists. As I mentioned, the shopper will be returning right to the store to purchase their supplies during this back to school season, and it's going to have an impact on share. What we could see here is that the number of trips that we saw at mass during the back to school season last year will increase. We're anticipating an increase in the number of trips to the store. And we're also anticipating an increase in the number of supplies in the basket when the consumer goes to a store like a mass retailer here that I have as an example. And then what we also anticipate is possibly the number of trips to a pure play e-commerce player might, either stay it might stay where they are, or it might decline slightly. So, we're going to be monitoring that as well. And this will be very interesting for you to look at once the season is over and we have this data out, to really see exactly what happens and how this played out at different types of channels and retailers. But the idea here is that as these consumers make these shifts this season, how can you make sure that you're adding additional supplies into the consumer's basket, and making sure that they're able to execute on that? One of the ways that I mentioned before is that add all to cart. That option and that convenience, I think, is something that the consumer is looking for. and the easier that you can make it for them to find all these supplies online, the more greater share of wallet that you'll be able to gain.
Yeah, I think I mean, me, I'm in the middle of all that. I do both, and I think that what the pandemic really did was upend the traditional shopper journey. It starts in so many different places, ends in so many different places that you got to be prepared to meet them when, where, and how they want to be met.
Yes, that omni experience and omni shopping, omni purchasing, all of these are crucial, and it has to be seamless. I think that, consumers' attention span now is just, we lose patience right quickly. So if something is giving us a hard time, or there's a glitch, yes, I might abandon that specific journey with that retailer that I'm currently interacting with and engaging with, and I might jump someplace else and do something that I think is quicker, especially if by my perception the price point is negligible, right? So I think that's just something to kind of think about as you design your e-commerce space. And that's why we're seeing UX and all these things just completely, right, growing. So on this slide here, I'm not going to go over all of these, but just know that, if someone is interested in a specific topic, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to someone on my team, and we're happy to discuss all of these with you. But these are a lot of the factors that we're monitoring during this back to school season. We're trying to get a really good understanding of how they're changing. We work with different partners on some of these, depending on who's tracking what. So just know that this is kind of like it's not an all-inclusive view, because there are many other factors I could probably list here that also influence the sales, but these are some of the top ones that we monitor. And I'm trying to think of, there's something here that I really want to kind of touch on. I would say out of these, this hybrid or virtual opt-in, like I mentioned before, schools are going to open, but how comfortable all parents are to send their child to the classroom and how often, depending on that uncertainty, I think it's important to monitor that consumer mindset and understand where they are. Right now, I believe that we've seen numbers that show, almost 60, close, somewhere between 50 to 60% of parents are comfortable sending their kids back into the classroom. So that is what we're seeing. But then you do have this other, right, this other portion of parents that are either undecided or they're still trying to, figure out what they want to do, or they're not quite comfortable. So if that is the case, that's an important demographic group to continue to engage with and understand what they need, and talk to them and see how they're changing over the next 4 to 6 weeks, right? As the school date gets closer. So I think that virtual opt-in is very important. My top 5 areas here about some of the things that, if you're an office supplies industry player, what should you be thinking about? I'm going to just call out one, in that we just published our Future of Office Supplies report. And what we're expecting is that our full year 2021 sales for office supplies will land somewhere around 8% above last year's sales. It's really going to be driven by back to school, which we actually anticipate back to school to be up about 12% versus last year for office supplies.
Well, that's a great way to wrap everything up with some good news.
That's right.
So,
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the great insights. Always great to chat with you. And I want to thank everybody for joining us.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me. This was great.